Have you ever wondered why the price of petrol goes up even when you're not driving more, or why some countries suddenly find it easier to export while others struggle to import basics? The answer often comes down to just one thing: exchange rates. Currency swings don't just affect money changers, they decide who can export, who can import, and who ends up facing inflation. Today, we are breaking down why exchange rates shape trade and why these shifts matter beyond the markets. An exchange rate is simply the value of one currency compared to another. For example, if $1 equals 100 Pakistani rupees, that's the exchange rate. If tomorrow it becomes 200 rupees for $1, the rupee has weakened. Countries manage exchange rates in different ways. Some let the market decide, demand and supply. Others peg their currency to the dollar or another major currency.
Market-driven exchange rate basically means that the value of a currency or the exchange rate is basically determined by the laws of supply and demand, or by the vicissitudes or the changes in the current account situation of a country. So, for example, if Pakistan's economy is only generating a current account deficit over a period of months or years, then we should see the Pakistani rupee sliding down against the dollar. On the other hand, if Pakistani economy generates a current account surplus, a significant current account surplus over a period of months or years, then we would observe the exchange rate or the Pakistani rupee appreciating against the US dollar. So when we say that a currency or an exchange rate is determined by the market, we are basically letting all these different drivers like trade deficit or the remittances that you receive determine essentially the exchange rate without any intervention by the central bank of the country, which is the State Bank of Pakistan. On the other hand, when we talk about a pegged exchange rate, that basically means that the government of a country is trying to maintain the exchange rate within a certain range or within certain bounds. So, for example, if the Pakistani government decides that 280 rupees to a dollar is the optimal exchange rate vis-a-vis our exports and import situation, then whenever we start generating a current account deficit, and because of which the rupee starts sliding against the dollar, then the central bank or the State Bank of Pakistan would intervene in the market, and they would start rapidly buying huge amounts of rupee to ensure that the rupee maintains its value at $280 rupees to a dollar. On the other hand, if the rupee starts appreciating because the economy has been generating large and continuous current account surpluses, State Bank of Pakistan would start selling rupees in the international market, thereby ensuring that the value of the exchange rate comes back to 280 rupees to a dollar. So whenever you have a central bank intervening in the international market to maintain a certain value of the exchange rate, we call that a pegged exchange rate.
But no matter how they're managed, exchange rates matter because global trade happens in foreign currencies, mainly the US dollar.
The US dollar is important in global trade because a great majority of transactions take place in US dollar. The price of oil is denominated in the US dollar. And for the fact that the US, being the world's biggest economy, is a major destination for a number of different countries around the world. So these are some of the reasons why the US is extremely important. US dollar is extremely important in the global economy. At the same time, a huge amount of international reserves are also kept in US dollars. So these are some of the reasons, the US being a huge destination for exports for so many different countries, international reserves being denominated and kept in US dollar, or a number of countries like China having invested in US treasuries, which are denominated in US dollar, are some of the reasons why the US dollar remains an extremely, probably the most important currency in the world.
Let's start with a weak currency. When a country's currency loses value, its exports become cheaper for foreign buyers. Imagine this. A Pakistani towel costs $10 in the US. If the rupee weakens, that same $10 earns the exporter more rupee back home. That's good for exporters. But there's a flip side. Exports become more expensive. Pakistan imports oil, gas, machinery, medicine, all paid for in dollars. So when the rupee weakens, everything from fuel to food gets costlier. The same pattern plays out globally. Countries with weaker currencies often export more, but their people pay more for imported goods.
Look, whenever a currency starts weakening or the exchange rate starts depreciating, so in Pakistan's case, that would mean that from, say for example, the exchange rate is around 200 rupees to a dollar. And if the currency weakens, that means a depreciation. So that would end up taking the exchange rate to 400 rupees to the dollar. This would make Pakistani exports half as expensive for all those people who are interested in buying our exports. So in theory, a weaker currency or a depreciating exchange rate should provide a great stimulus to a country's exports. But wait, the reality is not so simple because of two main reasons. Number one, a large component of our exports are imported. So when I say that, I basically am referring to dyes, chemicals, many other inputs that are actually imported. So where in theory our exports should become cheaper and we should find that there is a great boost to our exports, because of that imported component, would become more expensive. And you would not see this great boost in exports as was expected. And this is exactly what's been happening in Pakistan. At the same time, when the currency becomes weaker or the exchange rate depreciates, it makes everything you import into the country more and more and more expensive. So give you an example, about 3 years ago, Pakistan went through a massive depreciation and the huge historic inflation that followed, the inflation CPI went all the way up to almost 40%. That was basically imported, meaning that because we have to import such a large quantity of fuel, a majority of Pakistan's fuel is imported, and then that fuel or gasoline has a huge pass-through in the economy. This was the reason why everything started becoming more expensive about 3 years ago. So when a currency weakens, it means that now you can buy more of that currency with the US dollar. So if the exchange rate goes from 280, roughly 280 right now, to 350, this would mean that the currency is weakening, but it would not automatically translate into the kind of boost that economic theory tells you because of the important component. And at the same time, everything that you import would become more expensive, leading to huge inflation in the economy, which can ultimately result in a worse quality of life as well as potential political unrest in the country.
Now let's talk about a strong currency. When a currency gains value, imports become cheaper. Consumers benefit, businesses importing raw materials benefit, but exporters struggle. Take Japan or Europe. When their currencies strengthen against the dollar, their cars, electronics, and machinery suddenly become more expensive abroad. When the US dollar became very strong in recent years, many developing countries struggled. Why? Because global trade and global debt is mostly in dollars. A strong dollar makes imports costlier for other countries and increases the burden of dollar loans. Exchange rates don't just affect trade, they affect prices at home. When a currency weakens, imported fuel costs more, transport becomes expensive, food prices rise, inflation kicks in. There is also foreign debt. If a country has loans in dollars, A weaker local currency means the same loan now costs more in local money to repay. That's why exchange rate shocks can quickly turn into economic crisis. Pakistan is a clear case study of how exchange rates shape everyday life. Over the past few years, the Pakistani rupee has seen sharp declines. At one point, nearly 300 rupees were needed to buy $1. What happened next? First, imports became expensive, fuel prices surged, electricity costs rose, food inflation followed. At the same time, Pakistan's foreign debt became heavier because dollar loans now needed far more rupees to repay. Inflation hit record levels, crossing 30% at its peak. Yes, exporters earned more rupees per dollar, but for ordinary households, the cost of living soared. This shows a key reality. A weak currency may help exports, but it can deeply hurt consumers if imports are essential.
Well, like I just explained, if the exchange rate depreciates or the currency weakens, everything you import becomes more expensive. And the first major impact of that is at the prices at the gas station. Gasoline becomes more expensive. I remember a time a few years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, when a liter of gasoline used to cost less than 100 rupees. And that same price is now around 250 rupees. So you can imagine and the result and the reason why that has happened has to do with depreciation in Pakistan's exchange rate. Back in the day, the exchange rate was around 100 rupees to a dollar, and right now it is at 280 rupees to a dollar. So similarly, if the exchange rate depreciates to around 300 rupees to a dollar, we should see a lot of prices going up. We should see an uptick in inflation, and it should negatively impact the quality of life of the most vulnerable sections of the society, i.e., poor people.
So when we talk about exchange rates, we're not just talking about numbers on a screen. We're talking about the price of food, the cost of fuel, the burden of debt, and a country's ability to trade with the world. Currency swings decide who gains, who loses, and who pays the price. That's why exchange rates remain one of the most powerful forces shaping global trade.